YouTube's getting ready to start. So I'm going to have to keep going here. We're going to go ahead and get started here in just a second. Our YouTube broadcast is going to begin. My name's Dan Hood. I'm the chairman of the CMS Veterans Assistance Committee. I'd like to welcome you today, and it's my pleasure to have you for today's program titled Never Forget, Forever Honor. It's our Memorial Day program, annual Memorial Day program. Memorial Day is a day to give honor, distinction, and remembrance to the men and women who serve this country. On this Memorial Day, please take some time to stop, pause, and reflect on the service, sacrifice, and commitment of the men and women who enable us to live in the land of the free, the home of the brave. Please stand for a moment and face the flag while we play taps and have a moment of silence. Thank you. I think we're having some technical problems with our tabs. At this time, I'd like to welcome Rear Admiral Giberson, Deputy Director of Office of Human Capital, who will share a few words and introduce our keynote speaker. Thank you for coming.
Thanks a lot, Dan. So Memorial Day, just a few comments about that special day, and then I'll introduce our guest speaker. So we quote-unquote celebrate Memorial Day, but really we do it in a way that's respectful and conscious of why we do it. And why we do it is because we honor the people who have sacrificed for this day. If you really think about it, it's overwhelming to think about why we celebrate Memorial Day and all the people that served and all the people that lost their lives for service to this country. I do a lot of commencement talks for different universities and schools, and in my commencement talk I always discuss about the choices the new graduates are going to make as they go into the real world, and the choices sort of affirm them as a good father, a spouse, reputable person in the community, but also their choices to determine if they're going to serve or be served. And people that choose to serve certainly hold a special place for all of us, whether it's service in uniform or whether it's service as a public servant like we do here at CMS. It's the choice that they make to serve. So we have a gentleman here today that exemplifies service. Sergeant Major retired Dan Miller is an E9. For those of you that have not served before in the services, it is the highest enlisted rank attainable. What is unwritten in that, even though there's higher ranks in the officer ranks, is that it's probably the most respected position in all of the services, and it's the backbone of all of our services. So the E9s and the high E ranks are something that we all do respect and all are thankful that we have them with us. For those that have served and passed on, we recognize them today in their service. Sergeant Major retired Dan Miller is a self-proclaimed history buff. Many people consider historical research to be work, but Dan considers it his hobby. If you visit his home in Illinois, you'll be surrounded by history books, memorabilia, particularly those to the U.S. Marine Corps. where he served. He reenacted the landing at Iwo Jima twice, explored the island in detail, and stood where the flag was raised at Mount Suribachi. All because, he says, history captures his imagination. His passion for history grew out of his service. He has served a proud 29 years in the United States Marine Corps. His experiences included multiple deployments, more combat than he probably cares to remember, and far too many friends and fellow warriors lost. He's here to tell you about the positives of life and hope for the future. He will talk about coping with visible injuries, as well as the challenges of invisible wounds, such as traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, and how the Wounded Warrior Project helped him get to where he is today. On this special day, on Memorial Day, I'm very thankful to have the privilege to introduce to you Sergeant Major Retired Dan Miller while he makes history and joins us at CMS today. Thank you.
First off, I'd like to say good morning. Yeah, we're still, yeah. I travel a lot, so sometimes I get my time zones mixed up. Memorial Day. I'm going to start off by taking you on a little bit of a journey about me. You know, when I was a young man, I didn't know what I was going to do growing up. I didn't necessarily think I was going to be in the Marine Corps. In fact, I don't know why I joined, to tell you the truth. I can't remember that far back, but I do know this. At the age of 17, I decided to become a Marine, and I had to ask my mother's permission. And I will tell you that asking a mother to allow her son to go off to the Marine Corps, yeah, that's kind of harder than it sounds. But she agreed, and off I went. Throughout my career in the Marine Corps, both active and reserve, I did multiple deployments to Iraq. I lost 16 Marines. And there is not a day that goes by that I don't think of them in some way, shape, or form. So it's tough when days like Memorial Day come, because sadly a lot of people look at Memorial Day as an extra day off, or we're going to go have a picnic or a barbecue. But across this nation there are veterans that when Memorial Day comes, they stop and they pause and they think about their brothers and sisters that they've lost. And I'm not just talking about just in combat, I'm talking about things that happen when you're training as well. Because service members are killed on accident during training exercises. But you don't hear a lot about that. So Memorial Day. You know, throughout my deployments, when you're out there and you're fighting, you can't do it without knowing that there's support back home. Everybody in this room, for your profession that you have chosen, you support our nation's armed forces and the people that are involved in our nation's armed forces. And without that support, I'll tell you right now, it's almost impossible to get the job done. So I want to thank you, everybody in this room, for that right there. One particular thing that occurred when I was in Iraq, it was November 11th of 2004. There was a young Marine that, he was an IT specialist. Now, he wasn't an infantryman, he wasn't a combat Marine, he came to Iraq to make sure that the internet was up. And I'll tell you, as a Marine, you know, you go to Iraq, you don't want to just make sure the internet's up. He wanted to get involved, he wanted to fight. So he kept bothering me and asking me over and over again, Gunnery Sergeant Miller, would you please let me go out on a mission? Please let me go out on a mission. And finally one day I said okay, because he reminded me of a young man who was pestering mom at 17 years old to join the Marine Corps. So I taught him what I needed to teach him, and I put him out there, and he did a very good job. Sergeant Nicholas Bennett is his name. Well, on that particular day in November, the last thing I remember talking to Nick about was I was yelling at him about something, as gunnery sergeants in the Marine Corps do. We yell sometimes. So I was yelling at Nick. I remember turning around, and I heard a whoosh, and then everything was quiet. And I laid there, and I honestly thought, well, if this is what it's like to be dead, it's not so bad. I don't feel anything. But then after a couple of minutes, actually it was seconds, I started feeling my body again. And I started realizing that I was not dead. I couldn't hear very well, I couldn't see anything, and I had a real dry taste in my mouth. And I put my hands up to my ears, and I came back, and my hands had blood on them. And I didn't know what was going on. I kind of sat up, and I started checking myself, making sure, I had my arms and my legs and my hands. And then I heard Nick yelling for his mother. So as I sat up, I realized that I had been thrown quite a distance, and what had happened was this rocket had come in and had detonated, and it had really hurt Sergeant Bennett. Well, I crawled over to Sergeant Bennett, and I started administering first aid. And we had a corpsman, an AV corpsman came, and he got there, and he said, "You need to keep Nick alive. Keep him awake." So I looked at Nick in the eyes, and he was starting to fade, and I started tapping him on the face. And the taps turned to slaps, and the slaps turned to punches, and I ended up breaking Nick's jaw. But I kept him awake enough that we got him onto a helicopter, and he did survive. I found out later that as I said, had been thrown through the air, and I cracked the back of my skull open, but I never went in and got it checked because I was too busy taking care of my Marines. I just thought I had a big lump back there. Well, as a result of that, I have a traumatic brain injury. And what that happens as a veteran is, as I get older, I have a hard time with complex numbers, and I have a hard time remembering people's names. I just thought I was getting old, but in reality, that's part of the issue. That's my alive day. I found out later that if the rocket had functioned correctly, it would have vaporized both me and Nick. So I look back at that day, and I thank the Lord that I'm still here, to be able to raise my children and have a chance to speak to everyone out here. So Memorial Day. Like I said, a lot of people think about Memorial Day as a chance to have a picnic. But I want to go over a couple of things as far as Memorial Day is concerned that I think people sometimes forget. What does Memorial Day mean to a veteran? As I already stated, a lot of veterans, when Memorial Day comes, it's a hard day for them. If you know veterans, or if you are one, you know what I'm talking about. Because it's a day of remembrance of the dead, our fellow brothers and sisters who did not make it home. And out of respect, a lot of veterans don't really want to go to a party on Veterans Day, because it's not, or Memorial Day, I'm sorry, it's not that day. Veterans Day, yeah, okay, thank you for your service, but on Memorial Day, no, I don't want to go to a party. I want to think about my brothers and sisters and remember them and respect them. Processing remains. When I was in combat, we had Marines that were killed, and we had to deal with them. And we did it with respect. But the pictures in my mind I'll never forget. That person was talking 5 minutes ago. And now that person, his body is here, his soul is gone. And it's very tough for people that are in that line of work to process the remains of our soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen that come back from combat. And those people do it every day. And they try to do it as gentle and as respectful as possible, but sometimes, in honesty, there's not much left. And that is the harsh reality of war. So we do the best that we can do. Notifying process, okay? Notification for families. Let me talk about that for a minute. In the Marine Corps, it's called CACO, Combat or Casualty Assistance Calls, okay? And what that is I've done a couple of them. You have to go to the family, knock on the door, and whomever answers the door, and you're sitting there in uniform along with another Marine or a chaplain, and that person answers the door, and they look at you, and you have to tell them, "Sir, ma'am, I'm sorry, but your son or your daughter or your brother or your sister or whomever it might be was killed in action." And then you have to sit down with that family and try and help them to work through the shock of realizing that the person that they sent off to war is not going to come home. At least not going to come home in a sense that they're going to rejoin the family and go to that picnic. No, they're going to come home in a box. And I've done multiple casualty assistance calls. And I'll tell you, there is a good side to it because the family needs somebody there. The family needs somebody to help them to work their way through the process of grieving and the wake and the funeral and not to be forgotten. And that is the one good thing as far as Wounded Warrior Project and as far as I believe the services, I know the Marine Corps, we don't forget our family members of those that we have lost. And with Wounded Warrior Project, we support family members that have individuals that were killed in combat and they need help working their way through that grieving process. So that's something that you have to keep in mind. You know, just because you didn't serve overseas, you might be a mother or a father of someone that was lost. And that hurts just as much and it is just as painful as if you were that individual that died in combat. You never forget the people that raised and taught these young men and women to go and fight. I've already talked a little bit about the impact on family members. Let me tell you something. Me personally, the Marines that I lost in combat, I never forget them, and I have a very hard time. I've introduced myself to their family members, and the first time, sometimes I get a mother or a father say, listen, I really don't know what happened. They didn't tell me. All they said is he was killed in action. Can you please tell me what happened in his last few moments? It's very hard to do, to sit down with somebody and explain to them that their son, you know, God forbid, died screaming. But you have to inform them because they have a right to know. They have a right to know what happened to their loved one. And I firmly believe that. So even though it's hard, I've done it several times. Honesty is the best policy when you deal with something like that. And it's, like I said, it's easier to kind of glaze over it, but you don't want to do that. That's not fair to that mother, that father, that brother, that sister. Media coverage. You know what? Media coverage, if done correctly with respect, is a good thing as far as our fallen is concerned. And if you notice, a lot of times on Memorial Day, you see on TV, hey, Memorial Day sale, or hey, Memorial Day barbecue. No, that's not right. How about, hey, Memorial Day, remember those that have gone before us to fight for this nation, to give us the freedoms that we have. The right to be here today, the right to walk outside, the right to go and do what we want to do and not be oppressed. So with the media, sometimes, you know, I've done several escorts of remains back to that individual's home or town. And, you know, if the media is there and they're doing it properly, that's great. But if they're out there and they're trying to make it a big show, you know, you're talking about someone that gave his life or her life for this country. Don't use that as a segue to come up with some giant bit on TV about how, you know, oh, the war is bad or you know, politicize it. Don't do that. It's not right. Remember our fallen for what they are. Our fallen, remember Memorial Day is a day to memorialize them, to remember them, and to be thankful in your heart that you have the right to do what you do for all those that have gone in front of us and given the ultimate sacrifice. I talked about training facilities earlier. I'll tell this short story to you. I had a young Marine. I was stationed in Hawaii. Yes, me. I'm a redheaded kid from the south side of Chicago. I needed like SPF 5000 when I was out there because it was Hawaii. We were training one day and we were doing this operation. We were hooking up equipment to helicopters. Now this is just training. Nobody's shooting at you. There still have to be careful. You don't want to become complacent. But we hooked this water bowl up. Water bowl is this big giant drum that is filled with water that is left out in training areas so Marines can go and get a drink of water if they need it. Well, it was supposed to be empty, and this one wasn't completely empty, and somebody didn't check it. So we hooked it up to the helicopter, and the helicopter started to raise up, and that thing started to swing, and that makes it unstable. So the guy in the helicopter cut the rope so that the helicopter wouldn't crash. Well, my friend, as we were moving away from this, the water bowl came down on him, and it killed him instantly. Now, I talk about honesty. You go back to that family, you say, you know, ma'am, I'm sorry that your son died because a water bowl fell on him. But that is just as painful as if, I'm sorry, ma'am, your son died in combat in the Al-Anbar province in Iraq. It's the same thing. The common denominator is that person has lost a family member. So training accidents happen. You don't hear about them very often unless it's something big like a plane crashing. But every day, our servicemen are out there training. Men and women are training to better themselves to defend this country. And I tell you, there are many, many fatalities during training that you never hear about, but they do exist. I want to talk a little bit about the Tragedy Assistance Program, TAP. I've actually seen this come into play. TAP, when a family loses a service member, they feel lost. They don't know where to go or what to do. TAP is something where people will come in and help them to work their way through that process, give them an outlet to talk about the grief that they have, not hold it in, answer questions of what's going to happen next, answer those questions and stay with that family for an extended period of time. And they even offer seminars where the family can come in and they'll talk about grieving. They'll talk about the financial aspect of it. You know, things are going to change. Maybe we relied on that person's income who was in the service, and now we don't have it. I'm a young mother with a kid, and my husband is no longer here. What do I do, and how do I do it? So they will come in and they will assist you with that. Wounded Warrior Project has a program of long-term care for veterans and their family members. It's a little bit different, but that is something where, God forbid, a wounded warrior comes in and his caregiver passes away, and now instead of putting him in a home, Wounded Warrior Project will help him to continue to be independent. And so that is the program that we have, that we can help the families to the best of our abilities. I will tell you, as a Marine of so many years and understanding human dynamics and understanding what it is to lose people, as I said, I think about those people every day. Memorial Day is the day to memorialize our fallen men and women, not to go grab a hot dog and a beer. That is not the purpose of Memorial Day. And I thank you, each and every one of you, for being here. And those of you that are out there listening, I thank you for taking your time, listening and watching. And I ask that you take what I say and you move forward with it. When you're dealing with a veteran, remember that that person has given up a lot of their lives to give you the right to do what you want to do. And there's a saying, a mantra that I tell myself every day: I didn't come this far to only come this far. I'm not going to quit, and I ask that you not quit either, and that you help our veterans, and therefore you're helping yourselves. Thank you. All right. Good?
And all of the work that the Wounded Warrior Project does for all veterans. They have a great program. A lot of folks that need the assistance come into the Wounded Warrior Project, and they help them find work. They help them with their medical needs. They make sure that folks that might be having a financial hardship, that their lights stay on, and that their families continue to function. And I just would like to say thank you for coming and speaking to us today.
Yes, sir.
And we appreciate all that the Wounded Warrior Project does.
Yes, sir. And I have real quick, I have something for the Major. You know, Wounded Warrior Project, I didn't go too far into all our programs because this is about Memorial Day, and I want to concentrate on those that we've lost. But Wounded Warrior Project, in the military itself, there's a thing called a challenge coin. It's a big deal. Challenge coins are given to units to enhance what they call esprit de corps, enhance morale, okay? And you collect them and you can trade them. And throughout the military, every unit has one for the most part. And so a long time ago, as Wounded Warrior was growing, they decided to create their own challenge coin. And when you hand that challenge coin to someone else, you're doing that because that person is with you and believes in you and believes in the Wounded Warrior Project and is there to help the Wounded Warrior Project so that we can help veterans. That being said, I'd like to give the Major a Wounded Warrior Project challenge coin and thank him for everything that he does. Thank you,
Appreciate
sir.
it. Thank you. Thanks for coming. And I will accept on behalf of all the CMS veterans and would like to thank you all for coming to our program today and ask that please give special attention when we have a veterans function in the agency. We obviously need everyone's support and we want to create the best positive environment we can for veterans here at CMS. I hope you all have a very safe and happy Memorial Day and please honor those who we've lost. Thank you for coming.